everyone, I'm Lauren and welcome back to my channel. This is Light and Lavender, where we talk about all things books and my own writing journey, and today we're going through the books that I read in March. So my March wrap up wasn't too great. I say that, in my head I feel like I'm not reading enough, but I read 3 books, which to be fair is a good amount of books to read. I didn't have a lot of motivation in March to do any reading. I kind of lost all motivation for all creative outlets, which if you had a look at my YouTube channel in March, you'll have seen that there was barely any videos posted as well, so I was just kind of in a bit of a slump with life, I think. But I think that is a little bit understandable with the way the world's going and the fact that there wasn't a lot of chance to get outside and sort of explore, and I think I just emptied my creative well a little bit, and I needed to just try and sort that out and sort of reflect on that. I feel like I had a really good reading month this month. They were all above 4 stars for me, and that's pretty decent. So although I only read 3 books, I did read 3 pretty decent books. The first book that I read in March was The Hate You Give by Angie. I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. For anyone who doesn't know what the plot of this book is, because you might be like me and not read it yet, this book revolves around a shooting of a young black man. I think he's 16, so actually a black child, a boy, by a police officer, and one of his childhood friends, Star, is with him in the car at the time of this incident, and she sees everything that happens and becomes a key witness to the police trial that then takes place. This book revolves around gang violence in a small sort of ghetto area. I think it's New York, I'm not entirely sure because I don't really know the place names, but I get that sort of vibe that it's like a big city with a predominantly black community where there's a lot of gang violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of crime, and the police literally do not care about the people here. And we get to see this from Star's point of view, who lives in this neighbourhood but actually travels out to the local private school and gets a white education, is the way it's sort of like parallel, that she's got 2 different sides to her, and she mentions throughout the book how she has to put the black Star away so that she doesn't offend any of her friends at this private school, because they're not from the ghetto and they're not from that community and they don't understand the different sort of lingo, and she knows that she has to be on sort of a modified behaviour all the time to make sure that she doesn't get portrayed by any of the stereotypes of a black woman or as like an angry black woman or anything like that. So she's constantly thinking about the negative stereotypes. I really enjoyed this book. The reason I only gave it 4.5 stars out of 5 rather than 5 is because I did find myself drifting off a little bit, so I did put the book down and didn't pick it up for a few days, and I don't know if that's just because the book didn't grip me or if it's because of my overall sort of creative slump, but that did kind of detract from my enjoyment because I had to try and remember where I was every time I picked the book back up. I really enjoyed this book though. I loved the point of view that we got and the way that we were given an insight into how Star's mind and behaviour worked and how she had to split herself off and separate herself. I thought it was also really interesting to see one of her friends, I think she's Haley, who ends up being a massive racist, but in the sense of she doesn't think she's racist, so she makes inappropriate jokes about Star loving fried chicken. She makes inappropriate comments about their other friend, whose name I have forgotten, who is, I think she's Chinese, who has grandparents coming over for Thanksgiving, and she asks if they're going to eat cat, and she doesn't realise the harm in this, and when Star tries to point out to what she's doing is actually racist, she doubles down on her behaviour and she fights back. There's a point in the book which I think is so, I don't know, so I think it pinpoints a specific period in time, and so Star keeps in touch with all of her friends from this really private fancy school through Tumblr, and Haley unfollows Star's Tumblr because she's started posting about Black Lives Matter movement and Emmett Till, and Haley says that it's something that she's like going through. She don't want to see that sort of stuff on her dashboard, and that's where the first churnings of is Haley a racist comes in. And I love the way that the characters are portrayed through that, and how Tumblr has such a huge aspect. So I feel like it very much dates this book, but not in a bad way. I just love that sort of like nostalgia trip of going back to Tumblr, and this is how they keep in touch with each other. I think this book did a really good job of showing a lot of different dynamics and areas of this sort of community and culture and subset, not just from the teenager's point of view but also from the parents' point of view. Although it doesn't go into it in as much detail, we have the conflict with Star's dad Mac and her uncle. Star's dad was arrested, he was one of the gang lords in their community, and Star's uncle's a police officer, so it has that sort of dynamic shift and the grating between the two different sides of this community and how people try and help each other to get out of it. But it was a really interesting book, and I think that it was a nice change of scenery to read something so drastically different to what I'm used to reading, even though the subject matter within it was absolutely heartbreaking and was very reminiscent of a lot of the issues that have been going down within America for the past 200 years, but with more prominence in the past 7 years, I think it is, maybe 5 to 7 years anyway, where Tumblr became such a huge aspect of getting the word out there about shootings of unarmed black people in America. And I think that this does a really good job of transposing the seriousness of the issue into a fiction setting and showing the dynamic. I really liked that, and I think it was really, really well done, and I don't think that any other author would have been able to pull that off as well. I think Angie Thomas has been able to sort of mix the fiction with the reality of the situation for a huge percentage of people in America. I think it was really, really well done. The second book that I read in March was Pet by Akwaeke Emzi. Yes, I said it right. I gave this book 4 stars out of 5. Again, I kind of didn't feel fully pulled into this story. There was something about the narrative style that felt jarring to me, and I can't put my finger on what it was. I don't know if it was the point of view. It wasn't quite third person limited, but it wasn't first person, and it wasn't third person. There was like a weird, it's the MacLeod then. I don't know where the Spanish is coming from, but I apologise. But it was like a really strange mix of the 3 different sort of point of view styles, and it felt a little bit jarring. I'm not sure if that was the intent, because if it was really well done, but I didn't like it, and I just couldn't get over it. Every time I sort of found myself falling into the story, something happened and it like pulled me out again, so a little annoying. But I did love the overall premise of this. This book is set in the utopian town of Lucille after the angels have defeated all the demons in the world. So it's sort of a utopian place on Earth. I feel like it's based in Africa, just from some of the descriptions, but I'm not entirely sure. And yeah, there's no sort of like setting in this book. It's just this place where there is no more crime, there's no more bad people, is the only way to describe it. So there's no more murder, there's no more sexual assault or anything of that nature, there's no more sort of crime, theft. We're in a utopia. Another point that really annoyed me with this utopia is that the entire world, city, whatever it is, seems to be really naive about what's going on. It mentions that the war and the angels, who are the people who helped drive out all these demons and all the badness from the world, it was like a generation ago, but in the space of this one generation, they believe the world is this wonderfully utopian place and nothing bad can happen and there's no more evil people because they've all been removed. But it's been one generation, and I find it really odd, this sort of naivete. And that also was a little bit jarring, but that's because I couldn't make up my mind if we were dealing with this weird narrator type. I don't know if this weird narrator type was why. It was almost childlike at times, and I don't know, it just seemed a little bit off-putting. However, I did like the overall premise that we were in some sort of biblical utopia with angels and demons, and there was a fantastical element to this, but I don't want to go into it too much because it is a huge spoiler. I would really recommend this book though. I thought it was a really great read. It was a really interesting read and also very different from stuff that I'm used to reading, and I would really, 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 really recommend checking that out. And the third and final book that I read / listened to in March was Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is Michelle Obama's autobiography. I listened to a version on my library app on my phone, and it is narrated by Michelle Obama herself, and I loved the added intimacy of her narrating this book because it went into a lot of detail of her life and her upbringing and how she met Barack Obama and what life was like as a First Lady of the United States. There was so much to it that I didn't know. As a non-US citizen, I don't know if that is a reason for why I am sort of like pulled back from a lot of it, because I wouldn't have had the constant news reports as most American citizens would have had during the election of 2008. I was vaguely aware of it as a 16-year-old, but not so much aware that I knew everything that was happening. I saw all the horrificness in the media afterwards as I was growing up as a young woman, but I didn't really have much information on the actual election itself. I found it really interesting that Michelle Obama actually comes from a really poor, lower working class family, and just how poor she was and how she managed to get to the place that she did. And yes, there was some luck involved, but it was also a lot of her own hard work and dedication. Her family made sure that her and her brother would have a good education. They instilled in them a sense of, as long as you put your mind to it, you can achieve what you want, and make sure you can set yourself up for the future. It doesn't matter how painful something is, keep at the job you hate just so that you're alright in a few years' time. I thought it was a really interesting point of view, and also learning about how the educational system worked and how Michelle Obama had like a drive due to spite. She was told that she would never get into Princeton, she wasn't Princeton type, so she forced herself to get the grades for Princeton. And I just, honestly, it's just mesmerizing. It made me love this woman so much more. I know that an autobiography in a way can be some form of propaganda because you are putting your story across and how you want things to go, but I feel like it wasn't that biased. It did try and even things out and explain the thought process, and I really enjoyed it. I gave this book 4.5 stars out of 5. I don't know why I didn't give it 5. I think I'm like umming and ahhing between 4.5 and 5 stars, and yeah, it's just another great book. If you get the chance to listen to it, I would really recommend that, because being able to hear her tell her own story in her own words, and it was just so wonderful. So there was my somewhat successful reading month in March. Is 3 books good? I don't know. I could read more. I mean, in January I read 7, so I know I can read more, but it's just been one of those months. Have you read any of the books that I mentioned that I read in March? If you have, let me know what you thought to them down below. I would be really interested to find out your opinions, and maybe you think that my opinions on these books are totally wrong, and that's also valid, and I would like to know if you think that as well. If you want to see more of my videos, don't forget to subscribe, and also don't forget to hit like if you liked this video. I hope you're all well and you're all staying safe, and until next time, bye!